hidden in the archives for over 50 years.
11.
Thousands of reels of forgotten film
10.
brought together for the first time
9.
to reveal a seemingly impossible challenge.
Ignition sequence starts.
I thought, no way. Are you kidding me?
Every day had something that I had never seen before.
An incredible decade of trial
All systems are go.
and error.
We got serious problem.
At the end of the day, we all knew the risk.
We got dirt them.
A team of over 400,000 men and women
Every single one of those people had one goal in mind.
caught on camera.
I was at the right place at the right time.
3,
With unseen footage
2,
and exclusive interviews,
fantastic. 1.
the story of mankind's most audacious adventure.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
There's no turning back. You're going to the moon.
We are counting down toward the launch of Apollo 11. 3 hours and 32 minutes from now, man begins the greatest adventure in his history, a trip to the moon with the expectation of landing there.
Apollo 11 is ready for launch. It's taken an army of almost 500,000 scientists and engineers nearly a decade to get to this point. Now, a treasure trove of forgotten film, revealing this historic mission in jaw-dropping detail. Three hours before launch, NASA cameras capture the Apollo 11 crew suiting up.
My name is Mike Collins. On Apollo 11, I was the command module pilot. Flying to and from the moon is a three-man job. We each had specialties.
The mission commander is Neil Armstrong, responsible for getting his team to the moon and back. Buzz Aldrin, the lunar module pilot, will attempt the landing with Armstrong, while Mike Collins will stay in lunar orbit.
It was a question of camaraderie and all pitching together to get the job done.
Suited up and ready to go, the astronauts leave for the pad.
Right on time, the flying crew now departing from their crew quarters here at the Kennedy Space Center.
Neil Armstrong leads the crew into the glare of the world's press. Eight miles away, the most powerful machine ever built, the Saturn V rocket, awaits their arrival.
I went out there with Neil and Buzz. 39A was our pad. We'd been accustomed to going out to the pad and finding 40 or 50 workmen scampering up and down like ants on the gantries. And here, on launch day, no one was there. Anyway, we found our way up to this little elevator, three of us plus technician, and up we went, 300 and some feet in the air.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. Shortly, we'll expect astronauts Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins to come across Swing Arm 9 and stand by to board the spacecraft.
When I was waiting for my turn to board, I could look to my right and I see this gigantic pile of machinery, 360 feet tall, full of gadgets that were going to propel me to the moon.
Astronaut Fred Hayes is about to come out after giving the three prime crewmen a hand in their preliminary checkouts aboard.
My name is Fred Hayes. I was the backup lunar module pilot on the Apollo 11 mission. I was the last person to crawl out of the capsule, leaving Neil, Buzz, and Mike to take their trip to the moon. I waved goodbye to them and gave them a thumbs up, hoping things go well.
Okay, the swing arm is going to full retract at this time.
Filled with supercooled liquid fuel, the Saturn V weighs over 3,200 tons. Launching a rocket this big is an unprecedented challenge. Rarely seen footage reveals the immense scale of the task.
NASA's Project Apollo. Its most urgent engineering challenge, the development of a launch vehicle capable of hurtling men and material to a point 250,000 miles away. The moon.
The Saturn V must deliver at least 7.5 million pounds of thrust in a sustained, controlled way. Film footage traces almost 10 years developing a giant rocket engine, the F-1.
My name is Rick Weiss, propulsion engineer for all the Apollo missions. The F-1 engine was phenomenal, with 1.5 million pounds of thrust.
Film of NASA facilities across America reveals critical test firings to perfect the engine.
The whole key to it is timing, that the liquid oxygen meets the fuel at the right time, and it's burned precisely at the right moment.
The result is the most powerful combustion engine ever, which now must perform perfectly in full view of the world's cameras. From the air, film footage captures spectators pouring in to witness the launch.
The estimate is more than 1 million persons are in the immediate area in Brevard County to watch the launch.
And at the VIP stands 3.5 miles away from the pad, news cameras and home movies record the excitement.
I'm Kocho Solokov. I've known Neil since we were in the 6th grade. The VIP grandstand was 3.5 miles from where the rocket was. I felt very special to be there. Obviously, our best friend on that rocket.
It was just people, people, people everywhere. They just wanted to be a part of the history. I'm Joanne Morgan, Apollo 11 instrumentation controller in the Launch Control Center. The countdown in Apollo 11 was my first time to be there for liftoff.
Exclusive NASA film footage reveals the final tense moments, unseen by the outside world.
We just passed the 2-minute mark in the countdown, T-minus 1 minute, 54 seconds and counting.
They locked the doors. They wanted things quiet. Everybody focused on their work.
All indications coming in to the control center indicate we are go.
Apollo 11, the launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed. Thank you very much. No, it'll be a good one.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 0.
Hundreds of feet below the astronauts, launch pad cameras capture the F-1 engines exploding into life.
There's this gigantic belch of fire. And then it slowly ascends.
Cameras running at 500 frames a second capture a storm of ice shaken free from the rocket's frigid skin. Remastered for the first time in decades, this incredibly detailed slow-motion footage will allow engineers to scrutinize any potential failure second by second.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11.
Inside, there's all kinds of little jigs left and right. The engine's gimbaling back and forth to keep this machine in balance.
The crowd see the launch, but they can't hear it yet.
When the rocket started, there was no noise. But birds started flying everywhere.
At the bleachers, all of a sudden, the blast hits you.
Tower clear.
Your clothes shook. I could not believe it.
The shockwave hit and the floor is shaking.
Building shaking. What a moment. Man on the way to the moon.
I was screaming like everybody was, go, 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 go. There he goes. There's our buddy Neil going up there on their way to the moon.
11 Houston, you're good at 1 minute.
Tracking cameras follow the F-1 engines, lifting the rocket to an altitude of around 40 miles. But to get to orbit requires even more thrust.
If your mission is to go into deep space, you can't just take one rocket and expect it to carry everything that you need to carry. So you build it in stages.
Assembly footage reveals the Saturn V isn't one rocket, it's 3. Stacked on top of each other.
Mark, mode 1, Charlie. 1, Charlie.
Remastered film from telescopic cameras shows the Saturn V at a distance of 55 miles, capturing the end of the first stage burn.
This is Houston, you are go for staging.
Oh, there's an explosion outside your window, all kinds of yellow and red and fire. You lurch forward in your straps.
Staging.
Before you have a chance to react to that, the second stage lights up.
And ignition.
It's very traumatic. Oh my God, is this thing going to explode or has it exploded? Before you realize, no, it's just normal staging. It's shutting one stage down and cranking up the next stage.
We got skirt tip. Roger, we confirm skirt tip. Tower's gone. Roger, tower. Houston, be advised the visual is go today. Yeah, they finally gave me a window to look out.
You can't enjoy what you've already done. You have the next thing ahead. Ignition of your third stage rocket.
And ignition. Ignition confirmed. Thrust is go, 11.
Apollo 11 is on the way, riding that pillar of flame from the Saturn V into the skies where the moon is waiting.
The launch team did it. We just smiled and relished in the thought that it was done. To see the launcher there with nothing on it is just, I mean, it was just unbelievable. And the rocket's gone. There's nothing there. What just happened? You know, we were just working on it yesterday.
Once that vehicle has cleared the tower, the people at Mission Control in Houston are in charge with the rest of the flight.
Apollo 11, this is Houston, over.
Found deep in the NASA archives, film from inside Mission Control will reveal every aspect of Apollo 11's daring journey.
I'm Jerry Griffin, flight director for Apollo 11. When you walk into Mission Control and you're going to the moon, colors are a little different. Displays look brighter. It's the adrenaline.
Hello, Houston. This is Apollo 11. I'm reading you loud and clear. Go ahead, over.
My name is Glenn Lunny, the flight director for Apollo 11. It was an exciting time for me. When I sat at the console, I was responsible for everything that happened to the vehicle and the crew. The average age in Mission Control was about 27.
It was kind of like the nation gave the keys to the car to a bunch of kids and said, go to the moon. The astronauts, they had to fly the spacecraft, but we could see thousands of measurements, temperatures, voltages, all kinds of things that they couldn't.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit.
Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins have made it into Earth orbit, where they're treated to a spectacular sight.
Jesus Christ, look at that horizon. Isn't that something? God damn it. Yes, that's real. The picture of that.
Still photographs taken by Collins provide a perspective of Earth few have seen.
It's a beautiful low-pressure cell out here.
The crew of Apollo 11 are less than 2 hours into the greatest journey of their lives.
I play it? Yeah, I love one, yeah.
The latest chapter in an adventure that began 8 years earlier with an event that shook the world. In April 1961, Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first man in orbit.
It was very scary because the Russians have this astronaut. What in the world is going to happen next?
Determined to outdo the Soviets, President Kennedy announces a bold initiative.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
When Kennedy said we're going to do it in this decade, I thought, are you kidding me? This is 1961, we're going to do it in this decade? No way.
It's an audacious challenge. NASA has no time to lose.
The countdown begins at Cape Canaveral, Florida, for one of man's greatest adventures. John Glenn is one of 7 astronauts selected for Project Mercury.
Phase 1, the Mercury missions. The goal, to launch a man into orbit and bring him home safely.
The Mercury project was one-man capsule. First time we put people in space.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
0. A camera films John Glenn as he becomes the first American to orbit Earth.
All systems are go.
My name is Walter Cunningham. I was flying with the Marine Corps Reserve. I heard this voice screaming, "You lucky son of a bitch." And I looked around and realized it was me. I had done that screaming.
So this is Friendship 7. Beautiful view of the African coast. The horizon is a brilliant blue.
With the success of the Mercury program, NASA plans more complex space flights. Rare reels of film record their search for pilots with the right stuff to fly them.
When the space program was first created, people didn't know what sort of background they should select for this strange new space role.
Mike Collins, seen in this newly transferred film from 1962, hopes he's got what it takes.
Then someone said that the candidates should be graduates of an accredited test pilot school.
These men, including a young Neil Armstrong, regularly risk their lives pushing untried aircraft to the limits.
The role of the test pilot is to do things better, to do them higher, to do them faster.
About number 1 in climbing for 35.
It's exactly what NASA's looking for. And there's no shortage of applicants.
Well, my name is Jim Lovell. I was at the Naval Academy at the time.
I'm Al Worden. I had the test pilot training. I was less than the age limit. I thought, what have I got to lose?
Rare archive film shows the successful recruits meeting the world's press.
I'm Bill Anders. To my amazement, I got selected.
I'm Harrison Schmidt. I belong to the Group 4 scientist astronauts.
I'm astronaut Charlie Duke. The moon flight, if I got one, was going to be the ultimate adventure.
Among the new astronauts are 3 men destined to attempt the first moon landing.
We knew exactly what NASA was trying to do. It was going to be a successful program.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Slightly less than 1 minute to ignition, and everything is go.
After 1.5 Earth orbits, the crew of Apollo 11 must now fly further and faster than ever before.
Apollo 11 preparing to fire the 3rd stage engine again and put the men on the trajectory out toward the moon.
You've got to get your spacecraft out of Earth orbit, and that requires an additional burn. It's called TLI, translunar injection.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are go for TLI, over. Thank you.
When that engine lights, it keeps going faster and faster.
We confirm ignition, and the thrust is go.
24,000 miles an hour.
Ignition. We confirm ignition, and the thrust is go.
The Apollo 11 crew is breaking away from Earth at extraordinary speeds.
35,000 feet per second.
Film of Earth rapidly shrinking gives a sense of the acceleration needed to escape over 24,000 miles an hour.
Houston, Apollo 11, Matt Saturn gave us a magnificent ride. Roger, 11.
The flight to the moon is a very fragile daisy chain of events. You've got to look for what's the next one? When is that coming up? How am I going to cope with that?
Unseen film gives a fascinating insight into the years of training the astronauts faced before ever leaving the ground. For a flight to the moon, failure is not an option.
We use simulators to practice for the actual mission. We do everything from liftoff.
Roll complete.
We learn how the rocket is performing.
Astronauts also need to prepare themselves for the enormous strain of launch and landing.
In our centrifuge, we had to get up to 6 Gs because that is the G loading that we get during re-entry.
If you've never had an elephant sitting on your chest, that's what it felt like. The blood all pools in the back of your head.
After about 4 Gs, it's difficult to get to the switches.
As this shocking film reveals, NASA even used test subjects to analyze the effects of extreme launch vibrations.
The lead conductor of these simulations was a simulation supervisor, some devil-may-care kind of guy that would just drive you insane. They're constantly trying to kill you.
The team had enough failures in the simulator to make a 9-live cat look bad. I mean, I must have been killed 20 or 30 times, maybe per day.
But with every failure, their skills only improve.
It's like playing a piano. You can practice 8 hours a day for months to the point where you don't even think about it. You just do it.
Learning how to cope with all these difficulties gave us a great feeling of confidence that we really knew our machine.
But in space, there's little margin for error. Just over 3 hours after launch, Mike Collins prepares for the next critical maneuver.
What Mike had to do was separate the command module from the third stage of the Saturn, and then turn around, 180-degree maneuver, dock, eject the lunar module, and then back away.
We're waiting for the lunar module to come when they pull it out. Now, here we hear them.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Your go for separation.
As the spacecraft turns around, Mike's target lines up in the lens.
How far out are you, Mike? So far away.
It requires skill to get docked. Very, very slow motion. Very precise.
Stand by, we're close.
No reason to hurry. He had a long time to get it off of there. Mike did a wonderful job. Everything worked fine.
The 3 Apollo 11 astronauts, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Mike Collins, now with the lunar module attached to their nose, they'll be on the way to the moon.
The crew now face 8 days in the most hostile environment known to man.
My name is Bill Carpentier. I was the flight surgeon assigned to Apollo 11, with the goal of sending a man to the moon and returning him safely to Earth. What we didn't know was how a man was going to function in space.
Remastered film shows NASA left nothing to chance. Back in 1964, the space program is gathering pace. But with under 3 days of human spaceflight experience, NASA embarks on phase 2 of their grand plan, Project Gemini.
The Gemini program was to try to figure out all the problems that we would have going to the moon.
NASA launches 10 two-manned Earth-orbiting missions to practice spacewalks, rendezvous,
We're just flying a nose-to-nose, approximately 15 feet apart.
and docking maneuvers.
The flight, we are down. Hey, congratulations.
But the greatest unknown is the most critical. Can humans survive the duration of a moon mission? Rediscovered NASA film reveals astronauts Gordon Cooper and Pete Conrad's journey to find out.
My name is Jay Barbary. I reported Apollo 11 for NBC News. Gemini 5 was known as 8 days or bust. It was to prove that we could live in space long enough to go to the moon and back.
It was very important because nobody had ever flown that long.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Nobody knew what would happen. For how long could man adapt to weightlessness?
Gemini 5, I see you guys in 8 days.
It's been a busy day for astronauts Conrad and Cooper. They're now in their 50th revolution and passing over South America. They've logged...
Standing by for the pilot's blood pressure. Okay, pilot's blood pressure coming down.
Gordon Cooper and Pete Conrad tonight are nearly midway through their 8-day flight and showing no signs of any ill effects.
On the 5th day, we took over the endurance time from Russia.
Good morning, Gordo. How does it feel for the United States to be the new record holder?
At last, huh?
Roger. Congratulations.
The main concern was re-entry. There was no information about how the astronauts would handle G-forces after 8 days of weightlessness. What could be expected when they returned to Earth? Nobody knew.
Film found in the NASA archives documents the health of the men during recovery.
I was waiting for them in the helicopter. The crew was able to stand up. They were able to wave. They were in very good spirits. Both of them were joking around. They were normal. And so Gemini 5 gave confidence that we can send man to the moon and expect him to function after 8 days in space.
This is Houston. We're receiving a TV picture coming down from you all.
A day after launch, the Apollo 11 crew transmit their first live TV broadcast to millions of viewers on Earth.
It's Big Mike Collins there. Yeah, hello there, sports fans. You got a little bit of me, plus Neil's in the center couch. Buzz is doing the camera work this time.
And at the last minute, they load on board a TV camera. We did the best we could with it. We tried to put on an entertaining show, but our prime job was to get to the moon safely, and the TV camera was not going to help us at all in that regard.
With most of the mission ahead, the crew must trust their craft to protect them from the deadly environment of space.
Go ahead, 11. You got the medics down there watching heart rate? I'm trying to do some running in place.
Thanks to stunning remastered film footage, we're seeing the Apollo 11 mission like never before.
Yeah, Neil's standing on his head again. He's trying to make me nervous. Roger.
In the void of space, the crew's survival depends on the command module, a spacecraft born from a painful past. After the Mercury and Gemini missions, NASA begins its ultimate push to the moon, the Apollo program, their biggest undertaking ever. Uncovered Film Archive reveals the unprecedented preparations for landing men on the moon.
The difference between the Gemini program and the Apollo program was marked. For one thing, we had 3 astronauts on board.
Carrying 3 astronauts demands a much more complex spacecraft.
Cockpit, crew quarters, command center. When America's 3 astronauts travel to the moon, they'll use the Apollo command module for all these things.
I
name is Jerry Goodman. I worked on the interior design of the command module. The command module has to protect against the vacuum outside of the vehicle. And you had to have environmental control, temperature control, food and water, waste management, and all the rest of the supplies necessary to sustain them. It was very complex.
With the goal of landing on the moon before the end of the decade, engineers are pushed for time.
The first one was scheduled to fly in February of '67. There was pressure to get this done. We were working 24 hours a day.
There's no doubt we were moving quickly. We were working our tails off.
Rare film from the vaults reveals NASA's press conference announcing the first crew of their new spacecraft.
Gentlemen, the occasion, of course, is the naming of the first Apollo flight crew. Lieutenant Colonel Virgil Gus Grissom, Lieutenant Colonel Edward H. White, and Lieutenant Roger B. Chaffee.
I realize that this isn't a flight to the moon, but if it were, which two men would go down?
If it was this crew, I would be me and somebody else.
Needless to say, I'm extremely excited. I think I've got a couple of the greatest men in the world to work with. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Remastered film shows the Apollo 1 command module preparing for a launch test.
We were getting ready for the first flight, and everything was really looking up.
Ready to begin check-up of flight crew. Roger, let's start with commander. Roger. Baler bar down and locked. Check. Neck ring locked. Check. Tie down front and back. Check.
It was a plugs out test, a dress rehearsal, if you can think of it that way.
Fixed black and white TV cameras provide live pictures of the pad tests.
Let me know when you have secured the door.
We would count down to 0 and it would stop.
This is ECS. Go ahead, ECS. Hatch door is secured. Roger.
With Grissom, White, and Chaffee sealed inside, the Apollo 1 countdown test continues.
I wasn't on my transcript. Okay, I'm just barely reading you.
We were having trouble with the communication. Commander Gus Grissom was really complaining about it. They stopped the countdown to see if they could fix the communication. I kept my headset on and I heard this static, kind of a crackle. I said, something's going on at the Cape. I suspect by the time I got that out, it was over. We don't know to this day exactly where it sparked, but a fire started inside the command module. In those days, we used 100% oxygen. If you ever get a fire started in 100% oxygen atmosphere, you can burn almost anything.
We had a hatch that was sealed from the inside, and they got a spark just like that. They were all gone in about 18 seconds.
We were devastated by the loss of 3 of our friends. Going to the moon or going around the Earth, you're willing to take risks. But sitting in an unfueled spacecraft, that was not the way to go. That was not what we had joined for.
America is stunned by the deaths of 3 heroes. But the archives reveal a determination that this should never happen again.
After the fire, I was put on a team to straighten out the command module. We changed the air mixture. We went to a mix of oxygen and nitrogen. We redesigned the interior so nothing was flammable.
we decided to go to a unified hatch that you could open outward very fast.
Behind-the-scenes footage documents a radical redesign of the command module. By October 1968, after almost 2 years of delay, NASA finally has a spacecraft ready to go to the moon.
The fire reminded us that we had to be careful. The crew paid a big price, but they may have saved us.
Houston, Apollo 11. You guys happy with spacecraft systems? Roger. Affirmative. Everything's looking really good to us. Over.
Safe in their command module, 250,000 miles from Earth, Apollo 11 is closing in on the moon.
The trip to the moon is rather strange in that you're not allowed to look at the moon. The reason has to do with thermal conditions. To keep the heat evenly distributed, you have to turn broadside to the sun and rotate the machine like a chicken on a rotisserie.
But that's about to change. Apollo 11 must fire its rocket engine and be captured by the moon's gravity. A maneuver called lunar orbit insertion. A mistake at this stage could prove fatal.
Lunar orbit insertion was one of the more challenging aspects of the flight.
11, this is Houston. You are go for LOI, over. Roger.
The maneuver had to be essentially perfect.
The capture happens behind the moon, out of sight of mission control. If anything goes wrong, the astronauts are on their own.
We'll see you on the other side, over.
We now have had confirmation of loss of signal from the Apollo 11.
Apollo 11, this is Houston, over. Apollo 11, this is Houston.
3 days into their historic journey, Apollo 11 is behind the moon, cut off from mission control.
Fantastic. Look at the mountain.
But film footage and onboard voice recordings capture the astronauts' first reactions to their close-up view of the alien world.
Gosh, they're monsters. Now, there's a big mother over here, too. Come on now, Buzz. Don't be afraid of this big mother. Get some scientific name.
It was a bulbous, three-dimensional, huge sphere. Its belly stuck out toward us. It filled the whole window, so close that you're almost worried about hitting it.
Look warm down there, Neil? Sure can't tell. It's hotter than hell to me.
But it didn't offer me any particular warm invitation to go further.
We're a minute and a half away from acquisition time.
After around 35 anxious minutes, Mission Control are waiting to hear from the astronauts.
There it is. It's coming up. What? The Earth. See it? Yeah. Beautiful. Apollo 11, Apollo 11. This is Houston. How do you read? Bring you loud and clear, Houston.
With the blackout over and locked in lunar orbit, the crew turned their live TV camera on the world below.
We're getting a beautiful picture now, 11.
The lunar surface is the roughest place I've ever seen. Cratered everywhere, not one level spot.
The terrain is deadly, but they're hoping to find a safe landing spot in an area called the Sea of Tranquility.
Landing point is just barely into darkness. Roger, we can make out just barely some features on the surface.
To attempt a landing, Armstrong and Aldrin must put their lives in the hands of the most extraordinary spacecraft ever conceived. Its design and testing documented in rare remastered films.
The lunar module was an extraordinary challenge for engineers. The spacecraft that had to land on the moon, provide protection for the crew, and get the crew back to the command and service module.
Film of the early mock-ups reveal a craft that's anything but aerodynamic.
It was designed to fly outside the atmosphere, so it doesn't look like a normal spacecraft.
There are two main parts. The bottom is the descent stage.
The descent stage had the one big engine, could be throttled to make the landing.
On top is the ascent stage, which holds the crew on their way down.
You had no seats. The crew would have to stand up.
And when their time is up, blasts them off the surface. But the lunar module's greatest challenge is weight.
To maximize the time you could stay on the moon, everything was done possible to keep its mass at a minimum.
The skin was a little tougher than Reynolds wrap, but not much. One time, the guy bent over with a screwdriver in his pocket, and the screwdriver fell out and went right through the lunar module.
After 7 years of design and 2 test flights in space,
A nice looking machine. Oh, tremendous, no problem, man. Thank you.
NASA is convinced the lunar module is up to the job. Now, with Apollo 11, the whole world is about to find out.
We're approaching one of the critical moments of this flight. The command module and the lunar module will begin undocking.
Armstrong and Aldrin are inside the lunar module, nicknamed Eagle.
Eagle's undocked. Roger, how does it look? The Eagle has wings. Roger.
After separation, Collins films and photographs Eagle as it begins its descent. He's left to orbit the moon on board the command module, nicknamed Columbia.
Columbia, Houston, over. Houston, Columbia, radio loud and clear.
When Neil and Buzz went down to the surface, my job was to fill that command module. I was their base camp, their ticket home.
How did it go, over? Everything's going just swimmingly. Beautiful. Great.
On Earth, hundreds of millions of viewers follow events as Armstrong and Aldrin attempt to make history.
The lunar module has begun to drop into the orbit, which will take it down to the moon's surface.
Aldrin turns on Eagle's mounted camera to film its daring descent.
Sequence camera coming on.
With Apollo 11, the last 50,000 feet, that's when it became real.
Columbia, Eagle, Houston, both looking good, going over the hill.
Everything else up to that point, we had practiced in prior missions, but this was new territory. We're going to either land or we're going to abort, one of the two.
Mission Control charts Eagle's progress on a giant screen.
The room was absolutely jam-packed. We were sitting on the floors, on the steps. You talk about excitement.
My role in Apollo 11 was capsule communicator, Capcom, the only person in mission control who can actually talk to the crew.
Eagle, Houston, you're go for PDI, over. Roger, understand.
We ignited the engine.
Lights on. 1, 0. Ignition 10%.
And as we started to descent, it seemed like the wheels came off of the whole thing. We started having communication problems.
Eagle, Houston, we got data dropout.
We were having data drop out.
Program alarm. 1202.
We started having computer problems.
Give us a reading on the 1202 program alarm.
Mission Control faces a split-second decision. Land or abort.
Same alarm, and it appears to come up when we have a 1668 up. Roger, copy. Program alarm. 1202. 1202.
With alarms sounding on board Apollo 11's lunar module,
Give us the reading on the 1202 program alarm.
Mission Control must make a critical decision. Land or abort.
We had a series of alarms. I said, this is it. Computer's going belly up. We won't be able to continue.
We were overloading the computer. And it was saying to us, you're asking me to do more than I can do.
But as the cameras reveal, Flight Director Gene Kranz isn't ready to give up.
We're going that flight. We're going that alarm. If it doesn't reoccur, will we go? Roger. Capcom, we're go for landing. Eagle, Houston, you're go for landing, over. Roger, understand, go for landing, 3,000 feet.
The tension was rising in Mission Control with these things going wrong.
1201, Roger, 1201 alarm. We're go, same tide, we're go.
We're getting close to touchdown on the moon's surface. I'm getting knots in my stomach.
To land safely, Neil Armstrong needs complete control of Eagle.
2,000 feet, 2,000 feet.
Remastered film footage reveals how his piloting skills became second to none. Landing on an alien landscape requires pilots to master a complex flying machine in an airless, low-gravity environment.
My training was to go to NASA Langley Research Center and fly a tethered test vehicle that could put you in 1/6 gravity. It had the characteristics, control-wise, of the lunar module vehicle.
Once the astronauts master steering in a tethered simulator, they graduate to a self-powered training vehicle.
It had a gimbal jet engine that ran on jet fuel. You could orient it by little push rockets distributed about the vehicle. We had great confidence in the gauging system. We'd get down to 20 seconds and take off again. That confidence was overrated.
As Neil Armstrong is about to discover.
That morning, the fuel sensor had failed. We thought he had twice as much time. He didn't, and he ran out of gas.
Cameras capture Armstrong grappling for control.
What the heck happened? It was so fast. He just ejected out. That incident got him the job of landing on the moon because they put more faith in Neil Armstrong to make the right decisions to land than any other of the astronauts.
Now Armstrong faces the ultimate test of his flying skills. This time, ejecting isn't an option.
Coming down to 23.
Less than 1,000 feet above the moon, Eagle's onboard film camera rolls as Armstrong sees something troubling.
When Neil finally looked out the window and knew where the computer was going to land him, he had to change that because of a crater.
But that means piloting Eagle manually.
10 and 50 feet down at 4.
He overflew that crater to find another landing point, but in doing so, of course, used up more fuel.
300 feet down, 3.5. 47 forward.
He's looking for a place to land. I mean, if it's a rock, it's okay, but if it's a boulder, it may not be.
50 down at 2.5. 19 forward.
We had to be careful with the fuel. There's a limited amount of it on board.
Charlie Duke starts counting down to a low fuel abort call.
60 seconds.
Buzz's focus was inside, looking at the pressures, the temperatures.
6.5 down, 5.5 down. 9 forward.
He was calling height above the surface and his descent rate.
100 feet, 3.5 down.
So Neil didn't have to take his attention and look at a gauge.
75 feet, started looking good, down 1/2. 6 forward.
It's like a song and dance. They were working together to get the thing on the ground.
Down 2.5.
Buzz would make these calls about every 10 or 15 seconds.
Forward. Forward.
And between two calls, he slipped in something.
40 feet down, 2.5. Picking up some dust.
Picking up some dust. It still sends chills up my back. Ooh, we're there. We're gonna do this.
30 feet, 2.5 down.
Around the world, viewers follow the action through TV animations.
I was watching TV. Walter Cronkite was the anchor man. And I started yelling, "Go, Neil, go, Neil, go, Neil," like that.
Drift into the right level. 30 seconds. Great shadow.
Everybody's holding their breath.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
I heard Buzz say, "Contact, engine stop," and we knew they were on the ground.
We copy you down, Eagle. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
It was like air going out of a big balloon, you know. Shoo.
You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
It's just a great sigh of relief, and our hearts are pounding. Neil is just as calm as he can be.
Thank you.
He finally made it. I jumped up and down and I started to cry. I just said, "I knew you could do it, buddy. I knew you could do it."
Man on the moon.
Boy.
Okay, now I'm going to check breath here.
Moments after touchdown, Buzz Aldrin positions the onboard 16mm camera to record Neil Armstrong's descent.
I was reporting from Mission Control. NASA had programmed in for him a 4-hour rest period. I'm talking to Neil a couple of weeks before he takes off, and he says, "We ain't going to sleep. Do you think I'm going to sleep?" I just landed on the moon.
Okay, Houston, I'm on the porch. Roger, Neil.
Heading down the ladder, Armstrong pulls a cord, releasing a TV camera.
And we're getting a picture on the TV.
You got a good picture, huh?
Currently it's upside down on our monitor, but we can make out a fair amount of detail.
The live camera feed beams back to Earth, giving over 500 million people their first look at the moon's surface.
It was so wonderful to see Neil Armstrong step out.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Seeing coverage around the world, how many people cared, and how unifying it was, it made me a very proud American.
I'm at the foot of the ladder.
I watched Neil come down the ladder on the same screen that the people in Mission Control watched. They were all very focused with what was going on.
The surface appears to be very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
Neil moves down the pad.
I'm going to step off the limb now.
This was the moment it was going to happen. He put one foot down onto the moon, and then he said it.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. The surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe. It does adhere in fine layers, like powdered charcoal, to the sole and sides of my boot.
The date's now indelible, July 20th, 1969, the day man reached and walked on the moon.
Mission Control were so proud because we were there, we had done it, we were on the moon.
I had a little bit of envy, of course, being the backup commander. Had something happened to Neil during his training, I would have been the actual guy going. It's too bad he was so good.
As Armstrong explores the moon, his first words are resonating around the world.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. I asked Neil, how did you figure out how to say that? And he says, well, I was thinking about the game we used to play as kids called Mother May I. You would say, take 5 small steps to reach a certain goal. Or you could say, take 3 giant steps. And he said, on the way to the moon, I got to thinking about giant steps and small steps, and I kind of put them together.
But NASA must bring back more than words and pictures.
Okay, I'm on the top step.
Aldrin joins Armstrong on the surface to help gather priceless scientific samples.
Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
But how do the astronauts know what the scientists want collected? Newly uncovered film reveals the great lengths they went to learn.
You can't just go to the moon and just pick up a few rocks. You got to have them at least describe their landing site, and they couldn't say something geological unless they were trained in geology.
Cameras follow the astronauts as they swap flying for field work.
I'm Jerry Schauber, part of the Apollo 11 geology team. Training the groups of astronauts was difficult because if you're a test pilot, the geology is the last thing on your mind. They were full of testosterone, so they were always fooling around. It's like having a class that wasn't paying attention.
For the reluctant rockhounds, NASA singles out the most realistic lunar landscapes.
In Hawaii, we would take them to the volcanic eruptions so they could see geology happening in real time.
I can remember walking on a lava lake where you could see the molten lava down below.
One of the astronauts said, I smell rubber. That was their boots burning because the lava under there was still hot.
We went up to where it was flowing. Suddenly there was a small eruption. The liquid started to bubble up more and more. We got out of there just in the nick of time. We were very lucky that we didn't get trapped with the lava flows there.
Despite the hazards, the astronauts soon pick up the knowledge needed to practice geology on the lunar surface.
You learn how to identify the various rock types that you might encounter on the moon. We study volcanic rocks, igneous rocks like granites, sedimentary rocks. You learned if a rock was unusual.
The months of field work are critical. On the moon, they'll have less than 3 hours to put their training into practice.
So-called kangaroo hop.
Live TV coverage of Armstrong and Aldrin doesn't just enthrall millions of viewers, it helps geologists monitor the mission. Revealed here in the Forgotten Films.
I was given the assignment to keep track of the astronauts on the moon. I had a map and 2 little paper cutouts. One of them was marked for Commander.
How's the bulk sample coming, Neil? Bulk sample is 50 in field.
And one of them was marked LMP for Lunar Module Pilot.
I hope you're watching how hard I have to hit this into the ground to the tune of about 5 inches, Houston. Roger.
There was a TV camera over my map table, which could be projected into the flight control room. It sounds so silly, but it was just to keep track of them like a GPS would today.
The TV camera captures Armstrong collecting the samples. But on the moon, science comes second to safety.
Neil, this is Houston. Anything else that you can throw into the box would be acceptable.
First priority was to get them back without any problems.
You didn't get anything in those environmental samples, did you?
Not yet.
I don't think we'll have time.
All the time they were out there, I was saying, we got to get them back. We got to get them back.
Head on up the ladder, Buzz.
Okay, I'm heading on in.
After 2.5 hours, mankind's first moonwalk is coming to an end.
Okay, the hatch is closed and latched and verified secure.
Keeping tuned now to mission control before men leave the moon for the first time.
The ascent from the moon was probably the most nervous for me, and I'm sure it was for everyone.
To escape the moon, the astronauts must depend on the lunar module one last time.
It was one engine, one sole source of propulsion. That engine either worked or it didn't. They were dead men if it didn't work.
Houston, Tranquility Base. We're in the process of using up what film we have. Tranquility Base, Houston, you're cleared for takeoff. Roger, understand. We're number 1 on the runway.
It was tense, and there was nothing that we could do.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Port stage, engine arm ascent, proceed. Got beautiful. 26, 36 feet per second up.
Just after liftoff, Aldrin starts the film camera.
Very smooth. Very quiet ride.
To everyone's relief, the ascent stage engine fires flawlessly.
Eagle back in orbit. West Tranquility Base. Eagle Houston, roger, we copy. The whole world is proud of you.
After 21 hours alone in the command module, Columbia, Mike Collins prepares to pick up his crewmates.
Getting them up off the moon and safely back to Columbia had worried me for months.
Collins films the approaching lunar module.
Coming up on 1 minute to check. Neil, how's it looking?
Pretty good.
Cameras on the two spacecraft show them lining up.
I stayed in a perfect 60-mile orbit, and Neil and Buzz climbed up into orbit below me.
I'm not going to do a big Mike. I'm just letting her hold.
Then we could bring the two vehicles back together as we had trained to do.
Okay, we're on yours, Columbia.
Back together, the astronauts reignite the command module's engine, beginning their 3-day journey home.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, how did it go? Over. Thank you, Charlie. Boy, looking good here. That was a beautiful burn. They don't come any finer. Right.
The astronauts of Apollo 11 on their way back home for a splashdown on Thursday.
The way back from the moon, it's a pretty quiet time aboard Columbia.
There's the water gun. Sort of messy. I haven't been at this very long. Looks like you need a wineskin up there, Mike. That'd be nice.
On Earth, cameras record recovery preparations, targeted for a small splashdown zone in the South Pacific.
What you're worried about is from a distance of 250,000 miles, you're trying to hit a tiny little area.
Miss their target, and the astronauts may end up in one of the most hostile places on our planet. Restored footage shows how they prepared for the worst.
If you landed on land, you could land in a desert, you could land in the jungles, and so we learned how to survive for 3 days.
In the remote wastelands of America, cameras follow the astronauts as they learn to fend for themselves, using only what they can salvage from their spacecraft.
They gave us a bag of water and a shovel and a parachute.
You've got acres of nylon material, and from that material you can build tents and clothing to protect yourself from the blazing sunlight.
We had to make Arab-type dress. One thing I did learn is if you are in the desert, the idea is to conserve your sweat.
Parachutes can even help quench your thirst.
You dig a hole, you put a can in the bottom and take a piece of parachute, and at night the dew comes down and drains down this parachute so you get water.
Keeping cool in the desert is one thing. Finding food in the jungle is another.
The guy living in Houston, Texas, what does he know about the jungle? Nothing. So they put us loose down in Panama for a week, and we had to live off the land.
Mike Collins and I were teamed up for jungle survival school. But we were trained in all the good things there were to eat. You could chop the vine and get water, or you could pick fruit. They'd hire a native, and he would serve you all these goodies. I decided to gorge the night before, and if necessary, go foodless for 3 days. Mike raced all around the jungle, never caught anything, and was about to collapse from exhaustion.
You had to find critters if you could. We trapped a snake that we skinned.
It was an intriguing kind of meal. Tastes a little bit like chicken.
It was a good learning experience, and snake's pretty tasty, really, if you're hungry.
The astronauts are now prepared for any eventuality back on Earth. But they have to get there first.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. Are you still up there, over?
We are, but not quite as far as we were a while ago.
Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins face one final perilous challenge: surviving the searing heat and incredible speed of coming home.
The parachute up above my head must work perfectly tomorrow or we will plummet into the ocean. It's Apollo 11, signing off. And the sun's going down on schedule. It's getting real dark in here.
Apollo 11 is almost home. The crew uses up its last frames of film before braving the fires of re-entry.
There's always that concern that you've flown this entire mission and then you might lose them on landing. But there's no alternative. You got to go through it.
Apollo 11, Houston, you're still looking mighty fine here. You're cleared for landing. See you later.
Aldrin turns on his mounted camera for the last time, recording the inferno as they slam through the atmosphere at over 24,000 miles an hour.
When you get into the thin upper air, there's various colors, hues, little subtle lavenders around the edge. As the air thickens, you meld into the yellows, the oranges, the fires of friction.
As the protective heat shield melts away, a blazing trail of burning debris spews from the spacecraft.
There's blackout.
If you're going to burn up and then heat shield fail, it would be during that hottest period.
An airborne camera flying at 40,000 feet catches the first sight of Apollo 11 streaking through the Earth's atmosphere, engulfed in a ball of fire.
Orion 3 reported a visual contact.
To see it re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, you would say, here comes the shooting star.
Houston through Orion.
With the command module re-entering on target, in the Pacific Ocean, the USS Hornet scours the skies for their first glimpse of the returning astronauts.
Apollo 11, this is Hornet, over. Apollo 1, this is Apollo 11, reading the last clear. Our position 1330, 16915. 11 Hornet, copy.
The astronauts of Apollo 11, having left their footprints on the moon, have now returned to Earth.
In mission control, the cameras are also rolling, capturing the elation.
Jay Barbary is at the Manned Spacecraft Center, where a real celebration is underway.
People are gathering around here, cheering one another, congratulating one another.
Everybody lit up these great big cigars and puffing away and waving American flags.
But for Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins, the celebrations will have to wait. For them, a whole new phase of the mission begins, one designed to safeguard the survival of humanity.
first astronaut is now emerging.
A lot of scientists thought there was a possibility that the moon harbors very dangerous pathogens and that we were going to contaminate the whole planet.
Long lens film footage reveals the first steps taken to prevent contagion, using protective clothing.
The suits were just rubber bladders. The South Pacific was kind of warm and the sun was shining. I was sweating profusely.
On board USS Hornet, news crews jockey to get the first footage of the returning astronauts.
I opened the door of the helicopter, and the crew walked towards the mobile quarantine facility.
Then, bingo, the doors opened to our little enclosure.
The crew is sealed inside a modified Gulfstream trailer and transported back to Houston for quarantine.
Arriving at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, the astronauts will spend the remainder of their 21-day isolation period in this $8 million special building, the Lunar Receiving Laboratory.
And stepping out first, Commander Neil Armstrong.
Previously unseen footage reveals the lab where astronauts and support staff are holed up. Inside, NASA's cameras aren't just watching the crew.
We were in quarantine with this lovely colony of white mice.
They were exposed to the lunar material to test for viruses. If there were microbes found that were dangerous to the Earth, we may be quarantined for a very long time, maybe forever.
If the white mice lived, then ole, we'd carried this thing off. If the white mice died, we were in deep trouble.
Cameras roll on both mice and men for another 12 days. Thankfully for everyone, the mice survive. News cameras watch America's heroes enter a world changed forever by their actions.
John F. Kennedy gave us our mandate, get to the surface of the moon safely and return home all in one piece. And that's what we had done.
Today, the forgotten film footage from half a century ago keeps the memories of Apollo 11 as fresh as ever.
It was the best job I ever had in my life. It was fun. It was really, really fun.
Apollo was the ultimate adventure. It was a significant achievement in the history of man.
It was not a program just for the American people. It was Apollo to everybody that saw it.
It was wonderful. For a short time, it seemed like all mankind was united.
Neil told me, he says, I was just one man. He said, I just flew the thing. I'm not a hero. I was just a pilot. The heroes are all those people that did all this other work.
To all the other people that are listening and watching tonight, God bless you. Good night from Apollo 11.